Behind the Pod.
Hey, this is Brandon, and this is Behind the Pod. In this episode, we're going to take a look at episode 38, But I Won't Love Them, from Jess Duncan. I don't know if it's because I know that Jess is in roller derby or because she always starts with an edgy story, but that's why for the second time, Jess gets music that just kicks you in your pants. The heavy metal guitar riff that I chose matches the aggressive tone that Jess sets at the very beginning. So here's the guitar riff with the punchy drums. There's this antagonistic energy, and you can feel it. I wanted the guitar riff and the guitar solo that's coming up to sound as if it was consuming her, just like her anger. So what you hear as the story develops and the anger grows is a chaotic guitar solo that drowns her out in anger.
And I was going to continue to make it known how much I despised them. If I'm completely honest, when Brandon asked me to join this podcast, I was excited at the opportunity to finally be able to...
One of the challenges with this episode is the change in energy and how to capture that musically without it sounding like a bizarre mashup. On the one hand, there's this nuclear energy at the beginning, but the other two-thirds of the episode changes energy to a more conciliatory, more humble, more vulnerable posture. And I'm sure you can understand the challenge here musically. The trick with this episode, which worked out perfectly, were these wonderful little pauses. In Jess's original track, in her original vocal track, there weren't any spaces or pauses in her delivery. And you'll notice that with the heavy guitar riff, there are two generous breaks where you can hear only Jess's voice. And as I mentioned in a previous Behind the Pod episode, I usually try to highlight powerful lines by dropping everything but the vocal. And that's the case here too. But the second one gave me the opportunity to come back musically with a change in energy, which I think sounded very natural after she said, "That hurt." Take a listen to hear the change in energy and tone.
Of apostasy and shunned by the people I had known since infancy. My own grandfather has said while shaking his head, "I just don't know why you are choosing to go to hell." That hurts. It's no wonder I have so much built-up resentment towards Christians.
Jess asks herself a really brilliant, self-reflective question that deserves some further reflection from the listener. She asks, what good am I at being a witness to the evangelical community if all I ever do is criticize them? And this is really truly the question of the entire episode. To me, it's the question that has to be asked, not just of how we demonstrate the love of Jesus to the evangelical church, but to other groups that we disagree with. To me, this question needed some intentional and maybe even some uncomfortable space for people to contemplate. And there's this sound that I thought of almost as an afterthought that fades after the question into an uncomfortable silence before it kicks back in. And I hope you felt that. Here's the sound isolated and then in context.
No. What good am I at being a witness to the evangelical community if I am only criticizing them? How open are they going to be to welcome?
The final portion of this episode is the most vulnerable part from Jess. She talks about her issue being an issue of pride and that she doesn't have it all figured out. There's a key word that Jess says that introduces one of the final instruments. Whenever she says, however, it's basically a cue that says that what she's going to say needs to be contemplated further. And that's when you hear a guitar riff that sounds more pensive and thoughtful. So here's that guitar riff right here. And here it is with context.
However, I cannot allow my newfound freedom and enlightenment.
The episode ends with a slow fade, which I believe is the first slow fade that I've ever had in an episode. And usually it's a hard stop or an echo. But like most of this episode, the key here is reflection and contemplation of the message. And so a slow fade to me just kind of gradually leaves it with you as the listener to think about and to hold on to and to reflect on yourself. And so here's all of that in the ending for you to hear.
I don't have all the answers, and this was an incredibly difficult episode for me to write because it isn't something I have figured out. This is something I'm in the process of figuring out. I pray that God grow my long suffering. I pray that God give me the ability to show patience. I pray that through this process of loving people who are hard to love, I become more kind, more joyful, and sanctified.
Okay, that's it for episode 4 of Behind the Pod, and I'd love to get your feedback on what you think of these episodes. I really like talking about what's going on behind the scenes whenever I'm putting these together, so I'd love to hear what you have to say. Thanks for listening.
Behind the Pod.